rescue, revamp, create. The art of drum synthesis. The new course is available at Letsynthesize Academy.
Yo, the Larson here, welcome to the new Synthesize Sunday episode. So the Upbeats just released their new EP, and there is one song, one particular bass that I found really interesting, and there is a cool hidden trick inside it that I want to talk about today through this sort of remade that I made. Go to my Patreon for an extra tutorial on this beat and to grab this whole Ableton project with tons of others, and click here for my academy if you want to dig deep into music production. But right now let's jump into it. Yo, so here is this little beat once again. Right, so these are the drums. One sentence about the process. I had to apply a soothe. This is a lot faster to reduce the resonances, and a little EQing on high end, because the drums sounded too raw, so I think this was really necessary, and the glue compressor to add a little more loudness to it and compression. But it's not too much, and the quality of the drums is not coming from or because of the glue compressor, but because of the selection of the drum sounds. Right, we have the basses. Okay, so we have the starting bass. Really nice and growly, and I added a layer, a sub boom layer. This is very similar, and I think I have the idea from the Prodigy Firestarter. They did the same thing, so they had a crash, a boom, and sub boom, and everything starts up really heavy, like boom in the face. And this is what I started to grab here too. And I also layer it up with this serum sound. Sounds stupid, but in the mix, the main bass sounds really nasty, and this is what I'm going to talk about today mainly. We have a reese. And what I really love here is the fills that plays really well with the starting basses. Creates such a huge impact. This I borrowed away from the little sample pack that I gave out on my Patreon. Click here if you want to check it. And you can use them up everywhere basically. You can sound design with that, or just use them up as like a drum filler or a tone filler or whatever. And we have this vocal thing. That is just a granulator inside faceplant. So these are the basses. We have a few effects. This riser mainly. It's basically just the bass is resampled and added a huge amount of reverb to it. I reversed it, added a few effects like 2 instances of choruses and some peaks in the spectrum to bring up the interest, because without them it's just a pitch to up reverb thing with complex warping mode on, but with the effects it really sounds like a riser. I also added a fill again, but this time on the snare. Try to concentrate on this sound. Ooh ah, almost like a color response with this little liquid fill, filtered whatever thing. Sounds so great, I would say. It's a small detail and it's an ear tree that you can barely hear, but in a mix it sounds weird because it is there, you don't even recognize it. And this is what I love in making music, to add little details that only you can hear, but if I mute it, you will be able to hear it too. Okay, so as I said, the Upbeats song was my reference, my inspiration. That sounds like this. And what really caught my attention is the ending of this bass. There is this little percussive kind of vibrating, whatever. So this is why I applied this utility tool where we can focus only on the sides. So you can hear a lot better this time. So I was like, okay, this might be a layer on top of the basses or another sound source inside the preset. So I decided to do the second one. I tried to implement it inside the preset. But there is another thing. When the beat starts, the drop starts, we hear this really nice angry reese bass, but when we get to the end, we can hear that percussive kind of layer and some FM on top of it. So this is where we have only the growling bass, but when you get here, we can hear that FMB screechy kind of whatever. Here, you can clearly hear it here, starting here. So I'm pretty sure that there are three components of this bass. We have the growly bass, this FME kind of thing, and the percussive kind of element. Maybe these are less, so maybe the FM part and percussive part is one layer. I'm not really sure, but I decided to go with 3 layers. So this is how I came up with this sound. You can hear that I'm adding a FM and this little wobbling percussive element. So let's start with the sub because that is the simplest thing ever. It's just a sine distorted sine wave. So it goes to lane 3 where I only apply a distortion, this EQ to tame the mids and highs and the limiter to the end. Obviously the other layers go into lane 3 too. So let's talk about the main bass. I'm disabling the sub and this is how it sounds on its own. So I have this distorted pew wavetable. That sounds great on its own, by the way, but I had to filter, I had to add a little boost at around 300 Hz and distorted, and another distortion. Without the filter on the highs, it sounds too squeaky. But it's a lot heavier if I filter the very highs. Basically, we are replacing the higher frequencies of the wavetable with the distortion higher frequencies. This is why we needed this really heavy EQing, because the distortion brought out so much mids and mid-lows that we don't really need if we want to make clean bass sounds. Then for the higher screech, when we get to the end of the bass, so at around, I don't know, like the 4th bar or something, I added this sine wave on the 12th harmonic, and as you can see, I used the FM on the phase. And this LFO is the main thing here, because as you can see, this is what I used to dial in the FM. It is on 15/4. Really screamy and very heavy sound. Right, so after that I had to route this thing, the main bass, into lane 1. I was like, okay, let's add a disperser. This always creates really nice sounds for reeses, especially for reeses. But then I had to boost the mids. But then I had to boost the mid and the saturator. This brings out really heavy sounds, but too much higher. So we had to filter it, and the lows because we are having a separate sub, and the reverb to the end. But I was like, okay, we need even more voices to have a little more movement on the sound. So I added a flanger and a phaser to have even more colors moving and morphing as we sustain the bass, especially on a long time, like 4 or 5 bars. And I use the same LE4 for the phaser. And basically this is how the main bass with the sub was born. One more addition, I added another movement using LE4-1 on the frame of the wavetable. And to add a little vibrato, I'm using LE4-3, we can call it LE4-3. And basically this is all on the main bass. Let's go with the percussion layer. So it's basically just a bright major wavetable from the chords. And the trick here is the unison mode, where I went with the pentatonic minor with 8 voices of unison. I filtered the highs, the lows, and even more highs, because we are going to process it really heavily. So first I went with the frequency shifter. So it's a little different, but obviously we had to cut the lows because the frequency shifter brought out too much. And we needed an OTT to make everything be clear and loud. The main purpose of the slice EQ, where we cut around 800 Hz and boost at around 1.5, is to fit in the mix well. Because if I don't do that, it sticks out too much and it doesn't sound good. But then I had to automate the output gain. So it comes up with the FM screech using LFO3, maybe it is the second LFO. It's too bad we can't rename these LFOs, by the way. It will make so much sense. And the dual delay. To make it really wide, and reverb, obviously. Cool, so everything together, this sounds really, really great. And we are talking about one bass sound, one preset. Let's talk about one thing, this starting bass sound. It's really simple, by the way. I have this noise layer, compressed, sine, filtered. It's really, really simple. It's basically just a saw wave, where I use this fundamental square wavetable FM. Without that, it's still good, because the filters and the distortions create the heaviness and the growliness. So without the process, I instantly heard that the notch is really needed here. I instantly heard that the notch is necessary here. But then I was like, I want to create a little different tone for that. And the ring modulation inside the multipass brings out those frequencies really well. But I didn't want to mess up the low end, I just wanted to mess with the mid-lows and mids and the highs. And this ring mode creates so cool tone to it. I bet you can hear that. Then some filter modulation to get rid of the unwanted higher mess. A flanger. And a distortion. A disperser and an OTT to the end. But at the end, with the noise and the main bass together, I wanted to use, where I basically just play with the low pass filter. You can use a simple low pass filter. Here is just a quick snap heap coming from Teddy Killers to be able to have several processes in one tool. And then just slice EQ to have the final sound of the bass and the limiter. And as you can see, this LFO modulates a bunch of things, like the low pass filter, another low pass filter from the main bass, the notch cutoff, and the wavetable position of the FM modulator. But basically the trick here is the ring modulator on the higher part of the sound, or the second band. Because without that, it's just not that growly. We have one more sound, this cool reese. Now with reeses we have a problem when you use a huge pitch bend on it, like this one. It sounds so weak on the top. So on the lower frequencies it might sound great, but on the higher frequencies, like the second octave, it just sounds weak, and it just doesn't have to be like that. So if you want to learn how to create a cool reese that sounds great on a higher octave, like on the second octave, go to my Patreon. I uploaded a video about this bass sound. And there is one more sound we need to talk about, is this first fix. I use a squelchy FM on 16 voices. They are really, really heavily detuned, and this saw wave FM modulates it. The all-pass filter creates the really nice chaosy, noisy kind of texture on the sound. We have only a distortion with a high-pass filter, an OTT, and a little boost on the mid-highs, because that is what cut through the mix really well. So basically this is all here. If you want, you can add, for example, a frequency shifter to see what other colors you can bring out from this. Maybe this can be cool, but we need to chop off the lows. or you can go higher, but that iPad won't sound good. Right, so don't forget to check my Patreon for the extra tutorial and the Ableton download, and my academy if you want to learn a lot about music production. See you guys next time. Peace.